NASCAR has handed out big fines in this week's penalty report following the race manipulation at Martinsville. Plus, Irwindale Speedway is closing for real this time, unfortunately. Welcome back to Break Hard. I'm Matt. Everybody sat around on Tuesday waiting for the results to come in, not for the election, which you of course should go out and vote, but rather for the NASCAR penalty report. Everybody's sitting around. I even recorded an entire video that you guys will never see because, well, this is much more important than what I had said in that video. On Tuesday afternoon, NASCAR released their penalty report, and they hammered three different teams. The number 1 team of Ross Chastain, the number 3 team of Austin Dillon, and the number 23 team of Bubba Wallace all received penalties. Those 3 drivers were fined 50 driver points and $100,000 for their actions on Sunday. Their teams fined 50 owner points as well as a $100,000 fine for the teams. The crew chiefs, the spotters, and an executive from all 3 organizations have been suspended for this upcoming weekend's race at Phoenix. That means that Bubba Wallace's crew chief, Booty Barker, suspended. Spotter, Freddie Kraft, suspended. For Ross Chastain, that means that his crew chief, Phil Surgeon, suspended. Spotter, Brandon McReynolds, suspended. Brandon Benesh, spotter, the 3 car suspended. Justin Alexander, crew chief on the number 3 car, suspended as well. The executives that were suspended, comp director Tony Lunders over at Trackhouse, RCR executive Keith Rodden, as well as 2311 Racing team executive Dave Rogers, all suspended for this weekend's race at Martinsville. 9 people suspended, penalties for the drivers, penalties for the teams, monetary point fine, and it's unprecedented to see executives get suspended. And Elton Sawyer spoke to the media after NASCAR releases and said that was an escalation, and they'll continue to escalate the severity of the penalty until this stops happening. Now, it is certainly a fine, right? Like, NASCAR had to do something in the situation. The 1 and the 3 car clearly rode around, blocking for the 24, clearly communicated that over the radio. The 23 car clearly faded late in that race to allow Christopher Bell to get around him to get that 1 point. I mean, that was evidenced by NASCAR taking the car post-race to tear it down at the racetrack. They felt something fishy was up in the moment as well. Ultimately, they needed to send a message here. And is this a strong enough message? I would argue that, yeah, it is, because they suspended executives this time. There's going to be portions of the fan base that are like, why did you not penalize the manufacturer? And right now, according to Elton Sawyer, that's not in the rule book. So there's no rule that, explicitly says that manufacturers, 1, I guess, can't do this, or 2, that NASCAR can fine them or penalize them for doing that, for communicating sort of what they want the action plan to be during the closing laps of a given race. I would imagine that probably gets changed going forward. But also at the same time, NASCAR has to toe this line with the manufacturers because they don't want to hit the manufacturer with a huge penalty and then have that manufacturer pull their support out of NASCAR, right? Right now, they only have 3 OEMs. It would be devastating to go down to 2 OEMs. Even worse if they went down to 1 at that. What is this? IndyCar pre-2012? That would be absolutely terrible. So NASCAR has to toe this line here, but they also can't sort of let the inmates run the asylum, as the saying goes. They can't just let the manufacturer sort of dictate the outcome of these races. And I think that's going to be something that's going to have to be looked at going forward, because while the penalty is severe, right? We got executives suspended, which hasn't happened before. I'm not sure if $100,000 for the driver, $100,000 for the owners is enough to deter this from happening again, because who's to say that the manufacturer just isn't the one paying this? So ultimately, I think NASCAR is going to have to go back and revise the rule book. And I'm sure the brain trust down at NASCAR is already on top of that, right? Like, as much as people don't want to give them credit for, being smart, they do have smart people there. And ultimately they will make the changes that need to be done to try to prevent this going forward. But it all kind of stems from the manufacturer right now. And until something is done about that, I'm not 100% sure we won't see this happen again. Having, the crew chief, spotter, and team executives all suspended is certainly something. It's a step in the direction that I think they should definitely go. Finding the drivers as well. But I think at some point, if this happens again, you have to send an even bigger message. You suspend the drivers, crew chiefs, spotters, executives, and then you have to levy even bigger fines at that to deter people from doing it. Because at this point, if that penalty isn't enough to deter them, well, they're going to be like, all right, we'll write $100,000 or $200,000 check in this situation, but we still got a car into the championship race for some of them. So that's the penalty that came out of Martinsville. Ultimately, Hendrick Motorsports does not get penalized. There are some questions about Spire. Would they get penalized as well for their cars potentially being involved in some of the shenanigans that happened on track? Ultimately, that did not happen. William Byron in reality was kind of the innocent bystander here. He's just out there driving the race car. He's not over the radio being like, tell those guys to block behind me. I don't know why I'm holding up the phone symbol with my hand, but you get the idea of what I'm going for here. He's not telling them to block for him. He's not asking for positions or anything like that. It was all being orchestrated behind the scenes from what he was doing. So as much as, Justin Marks made his case on Tuesday morning on SiriusXM NASCAR, Jeff Gordon made his case as well. Ultimately, they were going to have to do something here. Now, RCR has said that they will appeal Austin Dillon's penalty. 2311 Racing have said that they will appeal their penalties as well. I assume we can expect the same out of Trackhouse, and NASCAR is going to have to make a decision on that. Part of me was expecting like a Formula One Spygate style penalty here, something that would be dramatic and enough to deter people from doing this again. And in that situation, it was $1 million fine. Now, I didn't expect $1 million fine to come out of this for NASCAR, but I thought that we might see something a step above where we saw. They went up a step this time, but I thought they might just jump 2 steps and really try to cut this off. Ultimately, though, it kind of comes down to the rule book, and that will have to be revised. But it is a step in the right direction. Now we'll have to wait and see if it's enough to deter people from doing it in the future. Every year we hear threats that Irwindale Speedway is going to close down. It's like something you can set your calendar to. Every time November comes around, December, there's always talk. Is Irwindale going to survive? It's going to be bulldozed. It's going to become this. It's going to become that. And every year they seem to survive. The track opened up in 1999, and it's probably been facing the same sort of question since 1999. But ultimately, after 25 years, Irwindale Speedway will finally close its doors for good in December and be torn down and make way for warehouses and an industrial park. And it's unfortunate to see that, especially for all of the race fans in Southern California. Irwindale Speedway is one of the best short tracks in the country, one of the best short tracks on the West Coast, hands down. It puts on fantastic racing. It's been the site of some really good ARCA battles, some really good KN and East-West shootouts, some good late model racing, a ton of Formula D events, and anything and everything in between. I mean, heck, even a Fast and Furious movie was set there, and we saw Dominic Toretto beat the crap out of somebody, and what was the origin story to sort of how he came up. So ultimately, it sucks to see Irwindale Speedway go away. I'm bummed about it because it's one of those racetracks that I never got the opportunity to watch a race there. I've seen it before, but unfortunately the property value just became, worth more than what the racetrack was. And it's hard to promote a racetrack, especially one in Southern California, especially one when the property value continues to rise and you have to look at it and be like, oh man. So back in 2022, it was bought by a developer. Of course, the track has survived 22, 23, 24. And now they're working with the city to develop plans to build a warehouse, park on the site of what was once Irwindale Speedway. Now it's just going to join more Southern California racetracks and a long list, unfortunately, long growing list of tracks that have met demolition and been replaced by things that certainly don't bring people a whole bunch of joy. Sorry, a warehouse just isn't going to bring anybody any sort of joy. It's not going to make anybody excited. But we saw it happen at Fontana. We saw it happen before that at Riverside. We saw it happen in Ontario. Now we're seeing it happen at Irwindale. And honestly, short track racing in Southern California is gone in the most part. Like Kern County still exists, but that's a little bit of a ways outside of Los Angeles. And for all the race fans in Southern California, you lose a really good racing facility. And it's unfortunate that nothing could really be done to save it because I understand it, right? Property value is high and you want to try to cash in. I mean, that's why NASCAR sold off most of Fontana for like $600 million because it's just too good of a payday to pass up. And I don't fault anybody for getting paid, but ultimately it just sucks for the fans because they're not going to be able to go enjoy weekly racing anymore. And for all the guys that used to race there, guys and girls, they have to find a new place to race. And now they have to drive further out to Kern County, or they have to drive further distance to Las Vegas or down to Arizona or something like that. And at the end of the day, race fans lose out. And I think that's the most unfortunate part out of all of this. Let me know your thoughts in the comments about the penalty report that came out, as well as, unfortunately, Irwindale closing. Like and subscribe to the channel. Follow me on TikTok at BreakHard, Instagram, Twitter, and Facebook at BreakHardBlog.